to the east. Zambia is more to the west then. If you look at the history of Malawi, formerly known as Nyasa land, I think also Mozambique today, David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Mozambique they still refer to the lake as Lake Nyasa.
That's correct.
Yeah. And there's quite a variety of different culture groups within Malawi. Obviously, the one group is Marawi, and I think that's also where the name derives from. Malawi comes from the word Maravi. There I've made a little mistake. I just saw it now. I see the area is 118,000 square meters. It must be square kilometers. So it sounds very big, but I'll show you another map just now. If you compare it to other countries, it's quite a small country in Africa. A little bit of the history. In 1891, like a lot of countries in Africa, has been colonized, and Malawi has been colonized by Britain. And in 64, we became independent. 1966, a republic. And here in Malawi, there's two prominent languages. English. Most people like to visit Malawi because a lot of your people do English. And then one of your local languages is Chichewa. I'm going to skip a little bit forward. I'm not going to spend too much time on each slide. There's a lot of information on the slides. I'll give you time to read. This is just a sketch I've made just to give you a little bit of idea the size of Africa. Nancy said I must maybe put that in a little bit of perspective. I've put the miles in there from Johannesburg. Most of you will know Johannesburg. To Malawi, or Lilongwe, the capital, as the crow flies, is 1,900 kilometers and 1,180 miles. You can maybe think of the geology and or geography in America. You put that in perspective. That's how big the southern part of Africa is. It takes us. Because we can prove that. If you travel from South Africa to Malawi, it takes you about 4 days if you have an easy drive. And it's often nice to travel via Botswana. Instead of going straight through Zimbabwe, you go through Botswana, Zambia, and then you get the opportunity to see the Victoria Falls on your way towards Malawi. This is a very busy slide, but it gives you a bit of idea of Malawi itself. Of course, a big attraction to Malawi is the lake. Lake Malawi is about 1/3 of the size of Malawi itself. And the yellow line, as you can see, is from north to south, about 730 miles. So quite a distance to travel. And a little bit later, I'll give you an idea. We do the whole country with a tour, about 13, 14-day tour. To the north, from the Lilongwe to the north, down the side of the lake and down back to the Lilongwe. This is just to give you an idea who we are. Barefoot Lodge and Safaris are based here in Malawi. And then, of course, Nancy is associated with Adventure Marketplace. And we are very happy to collaborate and see if we can maybe put a tour or a package together traveling here to Africa. This is one of the chalets or the rooms here at the lodge itself, Barefoot Lodge. It's a little bit outside of town, even though we in Lilongwe, maybe 10 kilometers from the city center, and very quiet, rustic place. People love to stay for a night or two before they go on safari throughout Malawi, but also our neighboring countries. Zambia is quite close by, and South Luangwa is one of the prominent parks, and that's also where David comes in, even though he's Malawian. He worked quite extensively in South Luangwa, one of the very well-known parks within Africa. This is our main feature in our garden. This is a picture taken from our restaurant out into the garden, one of the beautiful trees we've got here, one of the wild figs. And I always tell people Malawi's got 2 seasons, a wet season and a dry season. In the wet season, it's very beautiful at the moment, very green. And towards the end of June, July, it becomes very dry and dusty, but very good for game viewing in that time of the year. I'm just going to quickly tell something about myself, and I'm going to ask David also just to introduce himself and say something about himself as well. As you know, my name, Rudolf Badenhorst, looks very German, but I'm actually from South Africa, 8th generation South Africa. And 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to move up to Malawi, and Africa being in my blood, I took the opportunity. I'm quite happy to put some roots down and see what Africa has to offer from this part of the country. There's me busy handling a Cape Cobra. I've done some training with that so I can catch snakes in Malawi and release them safely. Because here people like to kill things. I'm also a tourist guide, qualified and trained in South Africa. And my skills and experience is extensive, and it carries all the way up to Tanzania, all the African countries up to Tanzania. This was in Swaziland with a group of children there. This was in Uganda. We went on a boat. I like photography. I don't see myself as a professional photographer, but I like the opportunities. And being a tour guide, you get to see the most beautiful places and things. So it's always handy to have your camera around. So yeah, and then a little bit about David. David, if you don't mind telling a little bit.
Hi, my name's David Kelly. I was born in Malawi, of Irish and African parentage. I've worked in the safari industry. I built my first lodge in Liwonde, just outside Liwonde National Park in 1992, ran it for 6 years, and then sold it because my daughter was of school age, and we moved to Scotland, and I was in Scotland for 18 years. During that time, I actually came back to Malawi and into Zambia. I produced and published a book on South Luangwa National Park. And my other book was on all the conservation areas in Malawi. I'm an artist. I paint in my spare time. And yes, I did work in South Luangwa as a lodge general manager for Thornycroft Lodge. And I did that for 4 years. And then I came through to Malawi when I was offered a job with Tongole Wilderness Lodge, which is in the Kotakota Wildlife Park. Yeah, so I haven't done the sort of safaris that he does. I haven't done sort of mobile safaris. My experience has been more in actually running safari lodges, and I've worked in conservation practically all my life. So that's me.
Thank you very much, David. But I would like to go back to this slide. Can you tell us a little bit about this? What happened there exactly?
This is when I was working in Kotakota Wildlife Reserve, because the mobile phone signal was actually almost non-existent. We used to drive up to a certain part of the park. And if you stood on your vehicle, you'd get a very small signal. And that's why we went there, was to actually be able to communicate. The only communication we had at the lodge was satellite internet, but then we couldn't really make private phone calls, especially if we needed supplies or if the people that we were going to talk to didn't have internet and WhatsApp, etc. So yes, that was it. It wasn't sort of trying to inspect an insect on the roof.
Okay, I thought maybe you're scared of a snake or something.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, David.
This is Nancy's thing on Malawi.
Yes. Yeah, just to carry on.
I know.
I think one of your...
No one caters to you.
Right.
I can hear someone. Okay.
That's my sister.
I think one of the reasons... No problem.
Okay.
Can I carry on?
Please.
Okay. I think one of the main reasons why people are attracted to Africa in a whole is obviously for the wildlife. We as Africans always say there's much more to Africa than just the wildlife, but definitely a big attraction. And that's also why I've concentrated a little bit on the national parks and the sanctuaries that we do find in Malawi. And I'm going to highlight a few of them. I think over the years, Malawi as a country has been, how can I say, neglected a little bit and also overexploited. A lot of your wildlife areas has been I don't want to use the word demolished, but hammered by what's the right word I'm looking for, David? Exploited maybe. And over the few years now, there's a company called African Parks that's done a lot of work to bring wildlife and conservation back into Malawi, and we're very happy to see the changes happening within the parks and the country as a whole.
I'd just like to add that African Parks is sort of like a wildlife charity in the sense that what it does is it sort of comes in and offers to take over the management of parks. And they're a very well-funded charity. And they've actually really done very well in Malawi. I've been able to see the progress. And recently, I've been to Liwonde National Park twice. And I had lived in Liwonde for 6 years in the 90s. And there's been such a dramatic change. The wildlife has just been flourishing. The law enforcement is done properly. And they also do a lot of community work, because you can't really look after a park unless you're actually making sure that the communities around are benefiting from the park itself, whether financially, socially, or in whichever other way. So I just wanted to say, power to African Parks. They've done a great job in Malawi.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. I also see I listed Liwonde. Liwonde is maybe one of the well-known national parks in Malawi, but then all of them, we'll just go through. Since 2015, we managed by African Parks, and like David said, quite a few changes. It's not a very big park compared to some of the African parks, but they have introduced quite a variety of species. You have a bunch of elephants there, and now recently cheetah and lion has been introduced. Black rhino, that is also quite a scarce species. And I think one of the major features that the park can benefit from is the river, Shire River. How do you pronounce it?
The Shiri River.
Shiri River. And that's a big attraction to the park as well. It attracts a lot of aquatic animals like your hippos and your crocodiles, and of course fish. So yeah, these pictures were taken both at Liwonde. The hippo lying there on top. I woke up the morning out of my campsite, the tent, and this hippo was just taking a snooze there next to the tent almost. So I was happy to take that picture and stay in my tent for a while. Kasungu National Park is a little further north from Lilongwe. If you keep an idea of the country in your head, Lilongwe is more or less in the center, and if you go further up north, find Kasungu National Park, a bit bigger. And I think, if I'm correct, it also borders onto Zambia.
Yes, it borders onto the Zambian border, and the park on the other side in Zambia is called Lukusuzi.
And something interesting I've read while I was there is there's an animal species or an antelope species called puku.
Yes.
I think that's one of the places where,
that's right,
the few places where puku is where you can find the puku otherwise than Zambia itself. Hiking safaris, mobile safaris, quite a good opportunity close to Lilongwe, the capital. Nika National Park is quite unique in the sense it's much higher situated. A big part of the park is quite high up. I think I did write here 2,500 meters above sea level, which gives it quite a different kind of vegetation. So I've met some people recently here in Malawi that came to Malawi especially for orchids, and they were quite happy to find a bunch of different orchid species up in the grasslands. Yeah.
The beauty about the Nika National Park is it gives you a feeling of actually not being in Africa. You've got rolling hills. When you're actually going up to the camp, or should I say to the park, you come to the main gate, which is Tazima, and you notice the vegetation changing as you're going up. Now, you start off from the gate with the Brachystegia woodland, and you get several different bird species. There's the blue flycatcher. You move on, you find the umbrella acacia, which is Acacia abyssinica. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it or actually seen it in real life. And then you move through, the road's quite bumpy, but you notice the difference as you're going up. And when you finally get to Chilinde, which is like the main camp, you also find that, like I said, you could almost be in Scotland, because even the actual grasslands are bracken, which is a common weed in Scotland.
Okay.
And you actually also have such a great variety. You've got a really nice variety of antelope. You've got the roan antelope, you've got eland, you've got reedbuck, you've got zebra, and the bird life again is different. You've got some of the small raptors like the pallid harrier, and you've also got pine forests. So it is very different, even in the sort of Malawi's hot, dry season. At night, they light a log fire in your cabins because it actually gets quite cool.
Yeah.
And the lowest recorded temperature during our winter was a few years back was -8. Wow. Between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning. So that's what makes Malawi so unique, is the variety of different landscapes, from high altitude, the air is quite thin on the Nika, right down to really quite hot places like Liwonde and Majeti.
Yeah. Yeah. Very unique. And of course, you see the picture of the leopard, one of the few places where there's quite a abundance of, not abundance, but a variety of leopard visible, or that you can find there. Not very different habitat for the leopard that I'm used to. David mentioned Majete, a bit warmer climate, a bit further down south again, if I'm correct. Right. And also a fairly short, a small park, 600 square kilometers, and also part of the Shrine Valley, and again managed by the African Parks. So a lot of changes and improvement on the park side and the wildlife. People often in the past pass through Malawi, say they'd rather go to Tanzania or Zambia. But I think Malawi is developing into a real tourist attraction with the lake and with the parks developing.
Yeah, Majeti is also a big 5 park. So they've got the buffalo, the elephant, the leopard, they've got the lion, and the rhino, the black rhino.
Okay. And then close to Lilongwe, the capital, on the way, if you take Lilongwe, the closest point to the lake, you find Kuti Wildlife Reserve. It's not one of the national parks, but it's a well-established wildlife reserve. And it also gives people a different kind of opportunity to interact with the nature. You don't have any of your dangerous animals in the sense of lion or leopard or anything like that, but you have your giraffe and your zebra. And it allows people to walk in the park freely, or then take a bicycle and cycle around by themselves. And if you're lucky, once in a while, you find the zebras actually in the restaurant with you. So it's a nice opportunity to take school kids and interact with the wildlife on a closer scale. Press the wrong button. And then, of course, Lake Malawi, the big attraction for Malawi. It's one of the African Great Lakes, and it's one of the southern lakes in the rift, or the East African Rift. And it's also the 3rd largest lake in Africa. Different people obviously measure the lakes in different ways, but yeah, it says the 3rd largest and then the 2nd deepest lake. As you see there, I wrote 706 meters is the deepest point in Lake Malawi. And that also gives you the opportunity for a variety of species of fish, mainly your small chislet fish, and then the bigger fish that people like to eat, the jumbo and the campango and the sardine that you find in the lake. David?
Yes, Lake Malawi the Lake Malawi National Park, which is situated in the south at Cape Maclear, is where most people go for sort of snorkeling and, diving. There are dive schools there. And yeah, it's absolutely stunning. One thing I'd advise though, if you do visit Malawi, I suppose it's called responsible tourism. Because Lake Malawi, especially in certain parts, has got bilharzia. It's wise to actually, if you visited and you want to swim, which you would want to do because it's so beautiful, you can buy the treatment over the counter, you go back home, 3 months, you take the drug, and then 2 weeks after you've taken that course, you take another course, and you're perfectly fine.
Yeah. Now, I also agree with that, because once you're at the lake, you definitely want to be in the water. It's such a beautiful and warm, nice water to swim in. And then, of course, we've got a variety of people within Malawi, beautiful, friendly people, and more than 18 million people within the country. And like I mentioned before, Chichewa and English is widely spoken. And that's what also makes it nice in Malawi, is that even the people you find at the filling station, they can speak English, and that makes communication much easier. Some of the other ethnic groups, of course, Chewa, Tambuku, and Ngoni. The different culture groups you do find here in Malawi. This is just a little bit of idea of one of the tours that we do. If you go to the website, you'll see we've got quite a few tours that is placed on the website. But we also do custom-made tours. So what people do is they look at one of the tours we do offer, and they say, listen, we would like something like this, but not exactly. And then, of course, we start talking. And that's also why we talk to Nancy quite a lot, because she's got specific places she wants to go and different kind of adventures she wants to embark on. So we're always open for interesting itineraries. But this is just to give you an idea. This is about a 13, 14-day itinerary. We started Barefoot Lodge and Safaris here at Lilongwe, and then we normally go up north, and we'll try to visit most of the parks that we've mentioned before. There with Jalinda Camp, that's where Nika is, and that's the furthest north we will go, and then we'll come back south again, but then on the coast of Lake Malawi. And we visit a few places along the lake, all the way down to the south, and then visit Lewonde right at the bottom before we turn back to Lilongwe. And direct flights, no direct flight, you will fly to Nairobi, Kenya, or then Johannesburg, South Africa, and then to Malawi.
Yeah,
Addis Ababa of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Some people, if they have some time, they will combine it with a tour. Maybe what we've done before is, I think with Christopher, you guys, we've done South Africa through Botswana, Zambia, Malawi, and then back to South Africa via Mozambique. It's quite a long tour, but it's also very beautiful, and you see a lot of different cultures and countryside when you do a trip like that.
Yeah, and it was nice because it did encompass a lot, and it was very, very varied. It was very varied, the stuff that we saw.
Yeah. Okay. And then, you know, sometimes people that come to Africa for the first time, they think they're going to end up here in the darkness of Africa, but we did progress. And you can see some of the accommodations that we do use. It varies from 2-star to 5-star accommodation. We also offer camping. People often like to combine maybe 3 or 4 nights camping and then do a 1 or 2 night in a lodge or a hotel. And there's a bunch of variety of accommodation available. One of the pictures I've put on here on the right-hand side, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong. The swimming pool is a very unique design. And often this is at Vu Camp in Lewonde. And sometimes, especially in the drier seasons, you find your hippos, they're wandering around, look for any kind of water source. And sometimes they will end up in a swimming pool, but they can't get out. So these guys have made a swimming pool in such a way, so if the hippo ends up in the pool, he can actually walk out himself again. So I thought that's very, very clever and very thoughtful on their behalf. Yeah, getting around, there's quite a few ways to travel. We do have some small buses available. If there's groups of people traveling around, we like to use the 4x4s, especially in the rainy season. There's not a lot of places that is accessible by normal car. And then, of course, in the lake, we've got the boats, various boats. Some people, they invest in catamaran, so you can do a fancy trip on the boat with a catamaran. And then one of the most common ways people travel here is by bicycle. You'll see once you visit Malawi, anything goes on the back of a bicycle. Firewood going all the way around to the top of the guy's head, or a pig they have to take to the abattoir to get slaughtered. Anything goes on the back of the bicycle. Some different dishes. Obviously, fish around the lake is very popular and common. And you will find often the young girls, they will go from village to village with some fresh bread on the back of the bicycle. So en route, we just stop and buy some fresh bread. The guys on the shores of the lake, they will offer a meal. They cook, especially fresh fish. There in the middle slide, she's holding a mushroom. It is, they grow wild here in the gardens, in the mountains, and the people will sell them next to the road. And then the kids on the right-hand side is selling something we call madasi. It's some dough that's cooked in oil, and you buy that along the road. So you won't go hungry in Malawi. Of course, in the bigger cities like Lilongwe, you also got Eastern and Western influence. So you can find almost any cuisine here in the bigger cities. Agreed? Even a nice Thai restaurant.
And Rudolf, who is the lovely lady with the mushroom?
That's my wife. Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah.
even though she doesn't even eat mushrooms, I made a pose for that picture. You know, over the years, if you travel with people, you find a few questions that people do ask. I've just mentioned a few things, but I'm sure there's a few questions you've got already. The currency, we use Malawi kwacha. I also put the exchange rate for you. I said it's the current exchange rate. We've got the flights, like I mentioned, to Malawi from Ethiopian Airs and Kenya Air. I'm actually not sure if South Africa is even flying anymore. But
no, they're not flying at the moment.
Yeah, at least Ethiopian and Kenya Air is flying. Supermarkets in the bigger cities, we've got very good supermarkets. Anything you really want, you can find in the supermarkets. And most of our stuff comes from South Africa, imported, but is available. And then cash machines, people can arrive with their credit card and they can actually withdraw money from the machine. Makes it much easier. And then also communication, you can actually buy a SIM card on arrival, put it in your phone and use it for the time you spend in Malawi. Internet is available, mostly with major lodges and accommodations, but from time to time it can be quite slow. So that's a few things I've touched on. If there's any other questions, feel free to ask afterwards. That's us. I think I'm coming to the end of the slideshow. If there's any questions or any queries, please feel free to send us any mails. I think Nancy is your contact there in the US. But yeah, like I said, I'm here in Malawi for any questions. And David, if there's any artwork, please feel free to go and visit his website as well. If you Google David Kelly, I've seen some of your beautiful, beautiful artwork. So yes, thanks, Nancy. I think that concludes my side of the slideshow. I'll give it back to you and maybe open up for questions.
Unmute myself. And I have a question from Roz. If I can figure out how to unmute her. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Just a minute. Let me. Okay. Thank you. How do I mute? Everyone is muted.
Nancy, they can unmute themselves.
Oh, maybe that's what you need to do, Roz. Yeah, Roz has a question. I'm sorry that our friend Anne from Ohio didn't join us because she's the hippo queen. I'm going to make sure she listens to the recording because that's great about that hippo pool.
If I may, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I don't know the ethics behind like interrupting and asking questions and that, but question more so for Rudolf on that. With the, and also for David, with the game parks, are there limits imposed per day on like the daily visitors so that they don't become overrun? Or like, are there, I mean, obviously, like you say, I mean, these are wonderful parks. And, you know, when you look at certainly the parks like Sabi Sabi and Kruger, like the bigger parks that have the masses of people going through there.
Yeah.
Are the parks in Malawi, are they being controlled insofar as the number of visitors per day? Like, is it on a pass system that you have to get, like only so many people are allowed into the parks per day?
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet. I don't know if you got the question, David, that he asked if there's a limit on a amount of people going into the parks. I don't think we're there yet at the moment.
Okay.
No, we're definitely not there yet. Partly because I don't think we've had that many tourists actually coming to Malawi. The advantage of that is that Malawi is relatively unspoiled, especially in terms of wildlife and conservation. So there aren't any limits. And I think, you know, obviously if the tourism increases dramatically, then especially the parks that are managed by African parks, they will certainly look at the ecological aspect of making sure that, you know, the environment is not affected by an overindulgence of tourists.
Yeah.
Well, I will
question.
say, I have a couple questions from folks through chat, but one thing I'll say is two main reasons I'm very interested in Malawi is first of all that Rudolf and Gerda are based out of there now, and they've become good friends, and also that it is an undiscovered country for most Americans and Canadians, I imagine. Most people think of Africa, they think of Tanzania, South Africa. So this is an opportunity for us to be the first of our community to consider Malawi and possibly organize a tour there, or more than one, depending on everyone's activity levels and ability levels and interest and dates and all of that. So that's my point. But also I have a question from Roz. She wants to know if the lodge will accommodate a gluten-free diet, and how much meat and seafood. I mean, there are a lot of varieties available for meat versus seafood.
Is that the question?
If a gluten-free diet can be afforded, that's not a problem. I have been a restaurateur. I've had a couple of restaurants, and we certainly can cater for any dietary needs. That's not a problem at all.
I think if we have time in advance and we know the clients, because obviously if we book a tour, we ask the dietary requirements beforehand. And if that's clearly stated, it's not a problem. We do have all the dietaries available within the bigger cities.
Oh, okay. And also, Pat asks, what is the drug that you have to take before or after you swim in the lake?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit. Can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, they want, Pat was interested to find out what the drug is that is required or recommended for swimming.
It's
why do you have to take it? Why do you have to take it?
Because there's a parasite that exists in the water called bilharzia. And as I said, the drug is freely available without prescription in any pharmacy in Malawi. It's called biltricide. And basically, it's just to make sure that it kills the parasite that might infest itself in you. So I've had to take it on 2 or 3 occasions because I have spent time at the lake. And basically you take it at night. It's based on weight ratio. You take it at night and that's it. You go to sleep with it. And the doctors will advise that 2 weeks later you take another dose. It's very cheap to buy and it's readily available at any of the pharmacies in Malawi. And I'm sure Rudolf, if would take you there, if you've been to the lake prior to you leaving, help you purchase the drug and you take it with you back to wherever you're coming from.
Yeah.
Is this a problem in the entire lake, or is it just in certain areas?
It's not the entire lake. It's certain areas. Mostly when we go to the lodges along the lake shore, they will have the right advice available when we arrive.
It usually occurs in high density areas. There are certain parts of the lake where you've got quite a large rural population that lives very close to it. And basically the infestation is transferred between the parasite human being, the human being comes back into the lake, etc. So that's how it actually works. But yeah, I mean, personally, I don't really have a problem with it, but it's advisable to actually follow doctors, what doctors advise and what they prescribe. And like I said, it's not something you can pass on. You're the one who might be infected. And as a precaution, after 3 months, you take the first lot of drugs and 2 weeks later, take the second course, and that's it.
Yeah. Sorry, you guys, that's my dog.
I do agree that once you're there, you are going to want to go swimming, because when my partner and I did the tour with Rudolf, we went down around Cape, I think it's Cape Maclear and Monkey Bay. And I mean, it's for the snorkeling down in there,
Yes.
not the wildlife, the sea, I guess, was it the sea life, I guess? The sea life that we saw when we were there, like at Cape Maclear and Monkey Bay, was breathtaking. And I mean, that was just snorkeling in the water. I mean, it was probably akin to swimming in the largest aquarium that you could ever imagine. And I mean, the water was crystal clear. It was like, I think anybody that goes down there, if you don't go in the water, you are definitely missing out. So I mean, I think it's a necessary precaution to take, and if it's readily accessible and it's inexpensive, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I will say.
I agree with you.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I agree with Christopher, but I don't think it must be a limitation for you to visit the lake. It's not. It is. How can I say? A precaution you can take, and then you can just carry on with the normal life. It's not a big issue. Nancy?
Yeah, what the slide you showed with the what in and about the lake. One thing I noticed is it is a freshwater lake, and some of the fish you mentioned, I remember having in our aquarium at home when I was growing up, the cichlids and things. So that would be interesting to be snorkeling around and seeing the fish that you had in your own tropical aquarium at some point.
Yeah.
So I have been in Malawi and in Lake Malawi in 1994 when I was in Zimbabwe and wanted to get to a conference that was being held in Nairobi. We journeyed from Harare and had a 1 day off in Malawi. And is it Livingstonia? Is that the name of the town where the mountain is? Livingstone Mountain? Is that right, David?
Livingstonia is a beautiful area up in the mountain.
Yeah, so
Livingstonia, yes.
We had the day off.
Well, Livingstonia, I think you're talking about Salima, the lake.
What was Lake Malawi?
The Livingstonia Beach Hotel, which is by...
Well, we were camping, so I don't know exactly where we were, but that day, during the
Yes,
day, we hiked.
but it was by the lake.
Yeah, and there was, it was stunning
that by
and
the
beautiful
lake?
water. Yeah, right at the shores of the lake with a beautiful waterfall nearby.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
mm,
I'm not exactly sure where it was, but it was on the way to Nairobi.
okay.
Yeah, it was, and there are comments coming in to me personally that Andrea mentioned that her husband has spent time in Africa, and Lake Malawi is one of the most beautiful places he's ever seen. And again,
Yeah.
I have been to Africa in 1994. I was there for 3 months and traveled around a bit, but then I went back in 2016. Elaine is on this call. She was on that trip. There were 8 of us, and we did South Africa, and then met Rudolf in Johannesburg at Miki's Lodge, if you remember. And then on the way back through Johannesburg, I called Rudolf because I wanted to see if we could get a tour of Soweto, the southwestern townships in Johannesburg. And he was home and available to do that. And it was one of the most amazing days of our entire journey. Then we stayed in touch, and the following year is when Rudolf and I coordinated the next tour through Namibia and Botswana, which was again. So I have a lot of space in my heart for Africa. I want to keep going back.
Yeah. No, it's nice to hear that, Nancy. Africa is definitely a big attraction, and once it's in your blood, it stays in your blood. You always want to come back and explore more.
Yeah, once that dust gets in your skin, man, it's there forever. It's you know.
For sure. And I would recommend there's two movies I've seen recently about based in Africa. One is the My Octopus Teacher, which is available on Netflix, I believe. Just an amazing story about a man and an octopus. And then the other one, based in Malawi, is the wind, the boy who harnessed the wind.
That's an amazing movie.
Yes, and it goes to show you, like Rudolf was saying, it's the draw for us to go to Africa initially is the animals, but the people are just so much more of the experiences than seeing the amazing wild animals, which is also.
I totally agree, because I think when the nice thing about doing like the tours, like with Rudolf and that, is that, you know, what was nice was you weren't on a fixed schedule. So I mean, if there was an artisan beside the road that you could stop and you look at, and it's like the craftsmanship and the imagination and the ingenuity of some of these people in that, and the crafts that they make, and it's like, so that, like you say, the wildlife is the body of the tour and that, but I think the icing on the cake in many of the cases, no matter if it was in Namibia, Zambia, Botswana, no matter where we went, it was always I think the people that you meet as well, because it's like you do get to see the arts and crafts, and you do get to see the incredible painting and the ingenuity that somebody can, with a bunch of wire, what they can create into an egg basket out of nowhere. And I think it's just the human contact that you have with these people in that as well. I mean, that to me was, I think, part that left the biggest impression on me was the warmth of the people that were there as well.
For sure. Now, someone is also asking about the current situation with the pandemic in Malawi. I know if you have any information, or if it's still uncertain as we are here in the US, Canada.
Sorry, what was the question?
The pandemic.
It's about the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare it to the rest of the world, from a personal point of view, I don't think in Malawi we've in such a frenzy, if I can use that word, but definitely precaution has been taken everywhere. Like the rest of the world, everybody is aware of it, and we've also now in the second wave, so a lot more people are taking precaution, and social distancing, wearing masks, sanitizing is on the priority of all the people. But yeah, compared to South Africa, where I'm from, I feel a bit more relaxed in Malawi as in some of the other places. I'm not sure what your feeling is, David.
Yeah, well, obviously you can't compare the sort of medical resources as well as every other resource that's used outside of Malawi, or should I say Africa. But I think people have realized with civic education that it is for real, and people are taking precautions. Even in public transport, people are, rules have been set that you're only allowed to have sort of 2 people on a bench seat as opposed to what they would normally have 4. And yeah, it's taken some time for people to understand that it actually does exist. And of course, with a few deaths, it's suddenly hitting home that yes, it is serious. So yes, there have been a lot of changes, and the government has actually put into place some very positive measures, like trying to make sure that they bring all the sort of COVID patients into one center. They're converting one of the football stadiums, and that's actually going to be where all COVID patients are going, so that it frees up the hospitals to actually be able to deal with other normal healthcare issues.
Yeah, so at the moment, I wouldn't say a strict curfew, but there is a curfew in place where people are only allowed to move around up till 8, 9 o'clock in the evenings, and then they're expected to be back home. So there is a few rules and regulations in place.
Are people required to quarantine for 14 days when they fly into Malawi?
The test, did you ask about the test?
No, I know, like, I know here in Canada and I believe in the States and that as well, people are being required to provide proof of a negative test in that. But I know in some countries, you are still required to quarantine for 14 days afterwards. In the countries that don't ask for the positive test results before you travel, I think those are the countries that are requiring like a 14-day hotel quarantine.
As long as I understand at the moment, yeah, no, I understand your question, Christopher. At the moment, as far as I know, you don't need to quarantine. You just need the negative test.
Okay. That in itself is a major plus, because it's like for most travelers and that, I mean, when you look at 2 weeks to have to come and stay in one spot.
Yeah, you quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to stay for 14 days in one spot, I would choose Barefoot Lodge. I mean, obviously, if that's where I was going to quarantine. But I think, I think when most people,
well, it would benefit. It would benefit him. You had to quarantine for 2 weeks because he would charge you for staying at his lodge.
Of course, yes.
Listen, I don't think I have enough watches for that to be able to afford that. So, but I think certainly for many travelers and that's something that is in the back of our minds, in the sense that if we have to quarantine for 14 days before going on with the whole reason for being there. I mean, that adds, obviously, it's not so much a case of the money, but it's a case also of the time. Like, not many of us have, a month and a half or a month that we can take off. I mean, most, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks I can manage, but it's like to go all the way to beautiful Africa and stay in one spot for 2 weeks and then only basically have a week and a half afterwards to travel. But I think, now, I mean, if that's the case that, you just have to provide proof of a negative result, then I think that's a bonus for tourism in Malawi, in a sense that's the case.
Well, the other thing is, And the reason these presentations have started is because we are all waiting, and we are living with this uncertainty, and that people are coping differently. In my world, in my friend circles, everyone has their own level of comfort. But while we are waiting and we're dealing with this uncertainty, it's great to learn more about destinations that I'm interested in going to. And I wanted to share, in case you hadn't seen this before, because it's, see if I can share my screen. Can you see it? Not yet. Hold on. I'm gonna try and share my screen.
We can't hear you that clearly.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, better.
One moment. I don't know if I can do it, but it's I'll put it in the link. It's the video that Rudolf and I made. We made 2 one-minute videos while I was there in Namibia and Botswana. And the boy who harnessed the wind, the one reminds me of that, Rudolf, when we were in Dune 45 and your hat blew off and you had to run down the, down. I want to try one more time to see if I can share it. Hold on.
I think also too, well, just while you're doing this, Nancy, and that as well, it's kind of cool. Like I mean, you've posted, oh, cool. Yeah.
Done.
John and I did our homework. We already watched those videos.
Good work.
Yeah.
I think, Nancy, one other, like, I mean, kudos for you for mentioning the 2 movies and that, but I think also too, I think if anybody out there has read any really cool books on Africa and that, it's always fun just to put them out there, like on a reading list and that. So, because I mean, there's so many books out there on it, but it's not just the travel logs, but I think are not just the guidebooks, but the travel logs are interesting in that as well, because those are the stories that we all come home with. So I think if anybody has any books that they have that
she's sharing this now.
Throw that up there on the site as well.
Oh, okay. I don't know how well that went, but again, we
saw a little bit of that, Nancy, but not everything. But I think you said you do have the link.
I do have the links, and I will share it right now in the chat with everyone. You can watch Rudolf running down the dune, chasing his hat, not harnessing the wind properly. So anyway, thank you.
We're losing a lot of internet at the moment.
Yeah, thank you everyone for signing in today. I really appreciate it. It's so nice to see you all, even though we're not seeing so many people in person these days. This has been really nice. So thank you, Rudolf and David and Christopher, my new friend in Ottawa.
Yeah, come on up sometime.
I know. I could have been Canadian on both sides of the family.
Nancy, if you can stay on a little after people.
Sure, I will. I'd be happy to
talk to you a little bit about this. I'm so sorry we missed the timing and came on late. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I recorded it, and I'm going to try and figure out how to share that recording with everyone. This is, hope it, you know.
If you just stay on a little bit.